Buenos dias und herzlich willkommen bei Gate 7, deinem Podcast über Fernweh und Fotografie. In dieser Show geht es um Menschen, für die Reisen mehr ist als Spaß und Erholung. Freue dich auf praktische Tipps und Tricks, wie du tief in fremde Kulturen eintauchst und lerne, deine Abenteuer in bewegenden Bildern festzuhalten, egal mit welcher Kamera. Bist du bereit? Dann los, lass uns abheben mit deinem Gastgeber, Kai Beermann.
Als ich dieses Gespräch mit Lars Boering führte, war die Welt noch eine andere. Frieden war der Rahmen dieses Interviews, denn am Rande des Global Peace Photo Awards in Wien sprach ich mit dem früheren Direktor der World Press Photo Foundation darüber, welche Rolle Bilder und Journalismus spielen, unsere Welt und Krisen besser zu verstehen. 5 Monate später hat sich die Welt dramatisch verändert. Russlands Invasion der Ukraine schockiert und bedroht nicht nur den Frieden und die Sicherheit in Europa, sondern weltweit. Während die Menschen in der Ukraine die Aggression mit eigenen Augen sehen und um ihr Land und ihr Leben bangen, blicken wir durch die Augen anderer auf den Konflikt. Neben Fotos, Videos und Tweets, die im Internet auf sozialen Medien kursieren, sind es dabei vor allen Dingen Journalistinnen und Journalisten, die vor Ort berichten. So schwer die Bilder vom Leid der zivilen Bevölkerung, von Bomben und Zerstörung auch zu ertragen sind, so wichtig sind sie, um die Grausamkeiten des Krieges zu zeigen und die russische Propaganda zu demaskieren. In der Ukraine wird aktuell einmal mehr deutlich, wie wichtig die Freiheit und Unabhängigkeit der Presse ist, um die Verursacher von Krieg für ihre Taten zur Rechenschaft zu ziehen. Auch wenn die Aufnahme dieses Gesprächs schon einige Zeit zurückliegt, die Fragen, die wir darin diskutieren, unter anderem nach der Macht der Bilder und die Bedeutung der Fähigkeit, visuelle Informationen zu lesen und zu deuten, all das sind Fragen, die aktueller denn je sind. In diesem Sinne den tapferen Menschen in der Ukraine viel Kraft in diesen schweren Zeiten und mögen Friede und Freiheit am Ende über brutale Gewalt siegen. Lars, before we start talking about visual storytelling, I like to talk with you about vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, you got me with this. We're sitting in a hotel while we talk about it. It's my guilty pleasure on Instagram. I have a page called Hotel Vacuum Cleaners. Ever since I travel around the world for work, I see them everywhere, and I photograph them and post them on my Instagram page. So if you want to take a look, Hotel Vacuum Cleaners on Instagram.
Doesn't always have to be the big issues that you photograph. Like here, the topic was peace, and we saw a variety of works from different international photographers exhibiting their work. But sometimes photography is a very personal thing, and you take pictures of things you observe, you go around, you follow your curiosity. How did you get into photography, and what does photography mean to you personally?
Yeah, I thought about studying photography when I was around 18 or 17, and then I looked how expensive it then already was to become a photographer with a commercial education. And I thought, I like it, but I'm not so sure if I want to go there. So I went to university, and that was all fine. And then that actually was the same with art history, which I like very much, but I also didn't go for art history because I thought then it's going to be a job instead of a hobby. But when I started working at the Amsterdam Art Foundation, I started there making what we called the weekend of photography. So we would have exhibitions with photography, and we acquired it for the foundation as well. And that's how my interest and love for photography started. And it has been going on ever since, from art to photography to to a photo gallery, and eventually also leading to working with World Press Photo Foundation.
You've been the director of the World Press Foundation for 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years. I started 2015. I stopped last summer. And took a break from it. That was a real honor and a pleasure. That was not easy because we reimagined World Press Photo, as I call it. What is photojournalism now? Well, we made it into visual journalism. Photography by itself is not enough. There's also digital storytelling and multimedia and all these things combined. Yeah, but for me, it still is a period that I hold very dearly.
You said that you implemented some changes when you took over your position over there. Can you explain that in a little bit more detail? What was your vision when you took on as director of World Press Foundation?
Yeah, I gave them a shock to the system when they asked me to apply for the job. I had the interview and I wrote a piece which said World Press Photo needs to change. So I thought, let's throw a Hail Mary and see what happens. And it happened. I said, look, there's a 16-year-old with a DSLR can achieve more reach than a professional photographer. Some of them have 100,000 followers on social, whatever that means. And a very seasoned photographer reaches up to 500 and is struggling to get his work published. So this landscape has completely changed. And the other thing is, photography is very much a standstill. There's lots of creative conservatism in it, which I also feel is holding it back. And all that combined, I thought, what can we do to move beyond this single photo and move more to storytelling? And so the most visible changes were same award for digital storytelling, visual journalism. The word multimedia is not being used so much. And the other thing is a prize for the winning photo series, because I believe that photography can be best told in a series of work combined with all kinds of other elements. But so from one single photo to visual journalism and all these changes show themselves in the prizes. And then besides that, we also started working on being mindful of the Western gaze and the domination of Western worlds on photography from the start that it started 200 years ago till now. And so we also started working on, let's make a change and make also the photographers aware of their position when they make the work. And let's also take a look at photographers from other places in the world than just USA or Western Europe, so that they can also be part of this visual landscape. Yeah.
Visual storytelling, what does that mean, or what does good visual storytelling represent for you?
Well, they always think this stupid a photo says more than 1,000 words, which is utterly nonsense. Because without words, a photo is very often only 1/3 of the understanding. What I feel that we should recognize is a photo is one of the most used forms of communication. And so if a photo communicates a story, a important message, or anything that you want, then you're already on the good path of telling what you want to get across. It is very uninteresting to have photos on something. I want photos to be about something, then it really starts to communicate. So very often we think the photo is first, but it is the story that is first. The story needs to be told or wants to be told. And photography are elements to help you to translate that story into an audience. So that's, and then the simplest forms of storytelling can be applied. You know, an intro and a development, and eventually a climax, and you wrap it up. That's the most simplest form. And I think most photographers get stuck in the single photo and think that this is doing the trick. But for me, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe these days we try to compress everything down to something, to bite-size things in social media to be consumable. We want it quick and get it out there, and maybe that also leads to this notion that one picture is maybe enough, and you need a little bit more of context, which is often lacking also, like talking about social media as a prior example.
Yeah, but it's your task as a photographer or a visual storyteller to stop the audience. If we compare it to old-fashioned magazines where you would flip through the pages and then suddenly you would stop because you would see something or read something, that's the thing that you're looking for. So there's not much difference with that on social media or any visual form of storytelling. If it makes you stop, then something has happened. And it can be visual, it can be something can hit you in the stomach, or it can touch your heart. But having that said, lots of photography is something that we don't notice. I think research years and years showed that on an average, when you walk around town, you will see at least 800 images, and it's possibly now much more. But at the end of the day, you would probably only recall 3. Your mind doesn't switch on easily. If you would recognize and remember everything, then you would be insane. So your brain is fine-tuned to select and choose, and I think that very often a good photo is able to stop you in your tracks and get you to research a little bit more. If you would spend more seconds on it, it's already doing its work. Yeah. So I don't believe so much. Yeah, if we flick through photos quickly, and especially my kids, the youngest are 15. They have a different way of consuming imagery. But I also see that it sometimes makes them stop and walk up to me and say, "Dad, you need to see this. This is either funny or this is wow or what is this?" And I think that hasn't changed. What we have changed is that the world around us is speeding up so much that even when we were young, we thought we could keep up with everything. I'm soon 52. I know that at one point I'll be also complaining that I can't keep up with the pace, but not for now.
What changes have you noticed in your own behavior to consume photography? Has there been a change over the years?
Yeah, certainly. You become... In the beginning, every photo is interesting or seems to be interesting, and then at one point you become extremely collective, and you get a period that you're utterly bored with photography, and it's not giving you anything anymore. I've had that very often, that I was like, I'm done with photography. Come on, there's nothing there which really does anything. But that comes and goes, and I just went to the Albertina here in Vienna, and I saw an exhibition that had an overview of American photography, and I was like, thank God, finally we have photo where there's no embroidery and all these extra things that we put in now to think that we need to make photography more interesting. Of course, that also helps. It's fun, and it's interesting what people do, and this collecting and mixing and matching, but to just enjoy straightforward photography, being a photo, is also, I just recognized it. And I thought, I've seen a lot of this before. But to just take a walk around and watch it and see all these big names, thinking, oh, right, this is part of the history of photography in such a good way. That's fine. On the other hand, there's so much imagery out there that it's also, the question sometimes arises, what is photography actually still now? Do we have something that really exists as purely photography, or are we in this huge storm of imagery, as I call it, around us? I think it's the last one, but it's sometimes very beautiful to see a photography to just jump out again and say, here I am. And I'm gonna do something with your brain. Yeah. So that's, I don't know where it's going to, but it's certainly a world that has become much more visual than ever before. And maybe this strange battle that we have seemed to have lost with words coming back. The history of mankind has a long reach of into the past of visuals, cave paintings to tell a story. And it's only since, let's say, 300-400 years that you and I have been able to read and write. Before that, it was just a very small group. So visuals have been sort of pushed aside by text. And I think actually now visuals are sort of have fought back and become the more dominant part. And that's going to be an interesting development, I would say. Yeah.
Visuals becoming more important maybe again, but on the other hand, you have this flood of images that we are exposed to. So I think it's very important for each and everyone to educate themselves to be visually literate. What does a visual literacy mean to you, and what's important in that context so that we can really appreciate the visual and make sense of it?
Yeah. Well, we all are taught, hopefully, to read and write. And last night, one of the keynote speeches told about how literacy is rising in the world, which is a great thing. I think that we now should teach ourselves or our kids or everybody what is it actually that a visual is or does. How do you read it and how do you define it? What is it actually that a good image does? So do we really understand the message that imagery is trying to get across? And that would be great if that would be part of the education of all of us. On the other hand, I don't see it very easily come back into the school system, but it's almost inevitable. And it's quite interesting to see how few people understand how imagery work. As if we don't have to think about it. And very often it just comes in and it comes out and there we go. But when I talk to people also in exhibitions or I do tours, I always tell them, well, take a close look at what this photo shows. There's much more in it than you think. Even with the work of Sebastião Salgado, I recently went through the exhibition in Baden by Wien where his miners in Brazil are there, and I explained to, let's say, an audience that doesn't know much about photography to read the image. Why is Salgado trying to keep us in this image? People climbing in and out of the mines as a Sisyphus labor. And I said, just because he wants you to get sort of in this circle of men going up, men going down. And then you see people like, yeah, now I get it. Now I understand why it is such a compelling image. So it's easy, but we have to start doing it. And but I don't know where to start, to be honest. By just doing my own part, I think it helps.
Yeah, it's a very complex process, digesting a photograph. It's on so many levels that it speaks to you. It's the aesthetic, the composition of an image. It's the content that is displayed, and then there's the emotional side that grabs you. And I think you explained it right. A good image just grabs you.
Should we just take one little break?
Yeah. An dieser Stelle ein kurzer Hinweis in eigener Sache über das Projekt Abenteuer Reportagefotografie, das ich gemeinsam mit Thomas Jones von den Fotologen mache und in dem wir uns mit dem Thema visuelles Storytelling beschäftigen.
Wir Menschen lieben seit jeher Geschichten. Wir begreifen, erleben und ordnen unsere Welt mit Hilfe von Geschichten. Gebannt lesen wir Artikel von investigativen Journalistinnen, die sich über Monate an einem Thema festbeißen, oder blicken auf Bilder von Fotografinnen aus Krisenregionen rund um den Globus. Faszinierend, ja, aber oft auch fern des Alltags. Storytelling und Reportage. Eher was für Profis? Falsch. In dem Projekt, das ich gemeinsam mit Kai Beermann mache, Abenteuer-Reportage-Fotografie, lernst du, wie du die Methodik des visuellen Storytelling und der Reportage auf deine Fotografie überträgst und zum Regisseur deines eigenen Lebens wirst. Das Leben ist aufregend genug und jeder kann zum Geschichtenerzähler werden. Ob in einem Bild oder in mehreren. Die Strategien der Profis kannst du auch vor der eigenen Haustür nutzen, um Momente und Ereignisse in emotionalen Bildern festzuhalten. Egal auf welchem fotografischen Niveau du aktuell stehst, mit welchen Absichten du fotografierst oder welche Ausrüstung du hast. Packende Geschichten in Bildern lassen sich mit jeder Kamera und bei jeder Gelegenheit erzählen. Bei Abenteuer-Reportage-Fotografie zeigen wir dir wie. Werde Teil unserer aktiven Community und mach dich mit uns auf in die faszinierende Welt des visuellen Geschichtenerzählens. Keine trockene Theorie, sondern Inhalte so bunt und abwechslungsreich wie das Leben selbst. Videokurse, interaktive Webinare, ein exklusiver Podcast und eine eigene Mitgliederplattform warten auf dich. Außerdem kannst du via Zoom bei den Aufnahmen für den Gate 7 Podcast live dabei sein und den Gästen anschließend deine Fragen stellen. Alle Informationen zum Kurs und unseren Workshops findest du auf abenteuer-reportagefotografie.de. Wir freuen uns schon auf dich und deine Geschichten.
Yes, okay. We pick it up from here. We were interrupted by some noise here going on in the hotel, Lars, and we were just talking about the complexity of a photograph and the different layers that there are and that you have to take into account when reading a photograph. Maybe you mentioned the example of Sebastião Salgado that you just saw. Are there other images that come to mind that you've seen recently that really grabbed you, that made you think, that made you feel something special?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's recently, but the photographs of Anna Buyas is about finding freedom in the water. Women in Zanzibar that teach each other how to swim because lots of women drown there. That's a combination of strong, beautiful, colorful images with a strong story behind it and a great edit to get across what you're looking at. I'm not so drawn very often to the big names or the blockbusters, although you can always see that those images really can be very powerful. That's also why they have been there so long. I try to very often find photos that are not easily noticed and have a bigger impact than people think. Sometimes people watch a photo and they can't really grasp why they think it's so strong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes explaining a little bit about composition or the calmness against the storm on the other side, or the use of color, or the way the composition is chosen helps. I'm not sure if there's a photo that really pops into my mind right now from the last. In that sense, it's also interesting. I mean, one of the things that was very impressive was more a video clip. You know, the plane taking off in Kabul with the boys falling off. That's a story of utter despair, and tells you a lot about what is going on there. And it turned into a still photo, but it's not the greatest photo, but it certainly made an impact, and it will stay with you for a long time. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this year's winner of the World Press Photo Award by Mats Nissen? It's also an image about Corona pandemic, but not in a sense like very dramatic scenes of dead people, of coffins, but a quite different approach and approach to encapsulate what was going on in this pandemic.
Yeah, I think it has to do a lot with Mats Nissen, who is the photographer, who is a very good photographer, but also a very compassionate human being. And it shows in his photos, not just this photo, but also the photo that won in 2015. But this one, it's a combination of things. It shows human beings, it shows the plastic, it shows emotion. And it's also an image as if a butterfly is grasping a family member. So there are so many elements in that photo that tick some boxes in our brains in different corners that at first view you can see that there's something interesting going on this photo, and the photo invites you to look at it in a very good way. And I think that is an example of a very successful photo that is leading into the bigger story, but can also stand on its own. Mm-hmm. And that makes it memorable, especially now when it has won a World Press Photo Award. Time will tell if it will stick with us. If we ask ourselves, what is the photo of the pandemic? I think we should be honest and say there's probably 10 or maybe even 20. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we have the capability to remember more than 3. Mm-hmm. So this one could be one of them. And luckily it's not a photo just about people dying or miserable scenes from places in the world where people can't defend themselves of not being photographed, even though this was done in the south of America. and certainly, the access of the photographer has helped. But I think he took good care of his subjects. Yeah, well done.
You said how difficult it is to pick just one image, and that there's not this one. There are many. That leads us a little bit to your participation in the jury for this award. You're on the jury, and it was your task to pick out the winning images. Take us to that process a little bit. What does that look like when you get to see the participants' images and to go through them, this process of narrowing it down to the images that are then presented in the end, and then to call one image to be the winner of a contest?
Now, the good thing is it's first of all narrowed down to a final batch, which we judge online, which we do in a calm way, sitting behind our computer, taking a close look at it and giving it stars or no stars. That's a good thing, because then you really can take your time, and then in the end you can also flag one of your favorites, because in the end it's a lot of people that make this combination, and at the end you end up with I would say 20 photos or photo series that you will discuss in the jury. And then we go through these photos, we read the story, we know the name, we know where it comes from, and I think that is a benefit where World Press Photo is judged anonymously, to keep it as independent and fair as possible. Here it's not the case. We don't have to do that, but so for me personally, I want the photos to be compelling, and I want them to do something, but I also keep in mind where it comes from, and then you have to put up a fight as a jury member, and sometimes you just have to let go of things. But I think that the system that we apply, where we discuss it and we vote and see how many hands are being counted, gets us to the end, to a very small shortlist. And and I would say there are some fierce debates in a friendly manner, but people will put up a fight. And personally, I always look at I want this list of names to be diverse. If we have the opportunity and the work is good or equally good, then you have to be able to put that in. So to the, it's good to look how many female photographers do we have in the final group, because photography has awfully disadvantaged women in the past, and probably still is. But also where are people coming from, and what do we represent? If we talk about world peace, then it should also be representing the world. It sometimes means that you win your argument, and it helps, and sometimes you just it sometimes comes from a place which you would love to have on the list, but the photography is just not strong enough. So then you also have to let go. But in this jury, I think it's good to be mindful of it, and we have the opportunity to do it, so let's do it. Other contests I've judged, and it's not possible, then it's just about the photo, which also gets you interesting results, but in a different way. Yeah, then it's harder to think about representation and inclusive results.
Here, at the Global Peace Photo Award, peace was in the center, images that represent an idea of what peace could be, apart from just the lack of violence. There are many different interpretations of what peace can mean. What do you think, what is it that an image can do to foster or strengthen peace in the world? What is the strength and the power of an image that it still can have today in this very, very visual world, as we talked about before?
Yeah, that's a very difficult, how does peace look like? This is what we challenge the photographers to tell us or to visualize. At the same time, we also have to take a position and think about it, what that is. Peace is also that we walk the streets and enjoy talking or sitting in the sun. that is enabled by peaceful coexistence. And so in that sense, it is actually leaving a lot of space. And it leaves you at the end to very often choose humanity, which is something that is also helps peace. But if we look at the results of the last years, then we see that we have a very diverse group of photographs that needs to represent it, and it's now, I think, in its 10th year. And if you see the whole group of photos, if you make them into an exhibition, then actually you start to see it. So that is. I just don't know. Sometimes I sit there and what do I do now? And so I keep in mind that it's sometimes beyond the photo, and that it's sometimes a colorful, happy scene can also represent it. But if it's something that is more on the edge and makes you think about how we coexist as mankind, then it can also be part of it. As long as you can give a good explanation at the end, it works. But I don't think many photographers go out there and say, today my topic is peace and I'm going to photograph it, because that's the difficult part of it. It's easy to go and think, let's photograph war. It's not easy to photograph it. It's dangerous. But we've seen it a lot, but we don't hardly ever see progress or solutions and I'm happy that is growing, because I think solutions also show that there's an option of finding resolve in things. So I try to keep peace as a word that is very open-ended, because it also leaves you a lot of space to get something in. As long as we don't put something in that really isn't peace and we start to argue why it is peace. I find it very, very strange that photographers send in imagery of women wherever it is in the world that have been poured over with acid, and say, she looks totally burnt, but she's now okay. It's like, what are we actually trying to do here, right? How come we think that we can think for her to think that she's now okay, while she clearly is not okay? Mm-hmm. Or war photography, you can always say, after the war is peace, and let's photograph the rubble in Syria, but the war isn't gone when the fighting has stopped. Mm-hmm. There's a long-term effect of that. So peace it maybe needs 10 times the time that we took to have war to get back into a peaceful state of mind. Mm-hmm. That makes it fascinating but also pleasantly complicated. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the keynote speech, it was pointed out that today, actually, if you look at the numbers, we live in a more peaceful time than ever. That many people nevertheless have the feeling that there's chaos all around us. How do you explain that? And what is the contribution of maybe journalism to that problem, or to that notion that many people have?
Well, it's clearly the flaw of media, which is dangerous to say as if I'm attacking media, but I'm not. As now the director of the European Journalism Center and Foundation, I'm all about journalism and media. But only till recently now, that is upcoming Solutions Journalism Network. And we also as a center started projects to show solutions, which is rigorous reporting on a problem that already seems to have found a fix or a solution, or it's moving. And but news is very often only bad news. And how come we are not interested in where the world is in much better shape? It puzzles me still, and I don't understand why this turnaround has not been made in full. While I also see that People, they are looking for better news. Bad news, or the news that we know, has also caused people to become a news avoider, which is the worst thing you can do, because then you don't reach them at all. So it's the task also of journalism and media to start reporting on the good things in life and the good things on the planet. Because I feel that seeing good things inspires to also be part of doing good things. And miserable things, yeah, of course, we have to use journalism and investigative journalism to hold the powerful into account and to report on things happening. But let's also focus on good things, because they are certainly out there. And the world it is proven that the world is in much better shape than probably even 20 years ago, but certainly 100 years ago. But somehow we, as mankind, perceive it to be not okay. Well, I would say count your blessings, but also tell the world about it. That would be a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
Lars, you mentioned that you moved from the World Press Foundation now to the European Journalism Center, director there. And in my research, I found something that was said about you, that you were chosen among many people applying for that job because you had a strong and compelling vision for your future job there. Can you give a little bit of detail what that means? What is your vision for your new job?
Yeah, there's also always the basics. It's almost 30 years old, so we are in a phase that we constantly have to reimagine things ourselves, centers. So one of the things there is, I think it's in an excellent position to play an even more important role in journalism. So the biggest goal is every journalist shall be able to be in touch with a program or a grant or knowledge, all these touch points. So for me, it's important that it becomes more visual to visible. So by making it more visual driven, you can make it also more visible. Because I come from visual journalism and now enter into a center that's all about journalism, but I don't hear anybody speak about photojournalism or visual journalism. Well, if you look at the output of things that have received a grant through us to produce something, I would say 75% has a very strong visual component. So there you also see this text-driven part has taken over. So let's see if we can make that combination more clear. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the main things. But also there, I want want journalism at large to continue to be forward-looking and take a positive approach. I was at a conference here in Vienna, and then people start talking about if we don't do anything in 10 years' time, journalism is dead. And I said, well, congratulations, or maybe not. But 10 years ago, we were saying the same things, and I think it's still there. And in many ways, it seems to be flourishing, although we don't have figured out the right business model to it. So let's find ways to create value, and if value is there, then money will follow. And not the other way around. Please give us money so we will do something. No, it's also the other way around. It works both ways. So that, in that sense, I'm always unconventional. It's part of who I am, but also the way I visualize working. And that's also what I want to get across. If you try to solve problems within the framework where it started to exist, that's impossible. So either you make a bigger framework or you have a different framework, but one of the two should be applied, because if you don't do anything, it's just gonna sink. And I don't think that should not be the case. Not with journalism, but also not with photojournalism or visual journalism. And I think we are so drawn all by stories that, as a storyteller, you're actually in the driver's seat and not in a disadvantaged position. Yeah. So let's apply that also to the European Journalism Center, just as we applied it to World Press Photo. And the good thing is my successor at World Press Photo is doing actually the same, which I like very much. It's not that she comes in and says, all right, things are good shape and I sense that this rethinking of our rethinking before takes place. And I think that is a very, very good thing to see, and I'm happy with that. Because the danger is that if they start to call you an institution, you're already half dead. So don't become an institution, but become a very energetic, forward-looking organization. Then you will never get stuck.
Yeah, I share your thoughts on the future of journalism. I don't think journalism is dead. People are so wired for stories, and stories will always be around. And it's the job of journalists to take advantage of the new tools that they have and tell compelling stories within the new frameworks that are at their disposal, I think, right?
Yeah, and it's the same applies what I told about the photojournalist, the 16-year-old with a camera or a phone, or formerly known as the phone, has a bigger reach than a seasoned photojournalist. It's also happening to journalism at large. There's people entering this field that don't call themselves journalists, but they apply journalism traits, or they behave as journalists, and they do remarkable things, and they get stories across that are very, very important. And I understand how difficult that is if you have a formal education, or you've been working on it and for many years, and suddenly the new kids on the block show up and they're like, So let's not be defensive and embrace them, because they can teach you the way forward. Because if you're a good journalist, why wouldn't you be able to aggregate the same kind of influence or following? It's a choice, it doesn't happen to you. You don't wake up in the morning and think like, oh wow, I have 100,000 followers. Where did they come from? No, it comes from hard work and talking about things that really matter to us, to the world. Yeah, and by showing these examples, you can be optimistic. Because if they don't work by themselves, then there would be no audience. There's no lack of audience. There's no lack of channels. There's no way that we can say that there's no options to communicate. It's become much easier and accessible. I mean, you basically can publish an article from your toilet seat if you want to. So there is no problem. There are challenges on how big tech companies are taking over and influencing our, humankind in a way that we should be careful. Sometimes we embrace it, sometimes we have to be careful. But journalism can move within these realms in a good way. And let's be honest, is there any other options than to not do it? Yeah, I don't think so. So move into that space and see where we end up. Be resilient and confident.
Back in the days, media was dominated more by the big media outlets, by names. So if you go back in time for Life magazine and photojournalism, or Stern magazine in Germany, you name it. Do you see the tendency now that journalism is moving much more to that journalists are more like a personal brand? They're the brand themselves, because they have these outlets, these platforms where they can position themselves, get a huge audience. Also thinking about young people, how they get their news today on YouTube, on TikTok, and it's a very interesting, fascinating mixture between influencer and a journalist, and reporting and getting across information.
Yeah, sometimes the combination between a really great name in photography and a big media organization helps the best. Lorenzo Tognoli landed last week back in Kabul everybody thinks, what is he doing? But he's working there, and he's publishing a lot with Washington Post, which is a big name and it's growing. Same applies to New York Times. In a little bit lesser extent, you could see it in European media, but it's still there. On the other hand, you also have names that do it on themselves, and are able to reach a substantial audience. I think that what we should look at, if we just talk about photography, that big names in photojournalism have not necessarily stayed in photojournalism, but are there because they have the ability to change the world for the better. So if you think about Stephanie Sinclair, who is not just a photographer, but also has a foundation that fights against child brides in a very successful way. Mohammed Muhaizen, who used to be working for the AP, is now on his own, but has everyday refugees and is making huge changes in camps by supplying goods, boots, whatever it is. Giles Dooley, with his legacy of war, himself being a triple amputee in Afghanistan by landmine, now makes sure that the world becomes a better place. So they are now this mix of storytellers, NGO leaders, whatever they are. So they don't need these big name titles. Of course, Mohammed Muhaizen is connected to National Geographic, and it helps them as well. So it becomes a pairing up of big names and big brands. And we shouldn't see brands as something just negative. It's just part of the power that they have to make the world a better place. And then it shows that doing good work with visuals very often has a bigger impact than this photo that is, used to be printed in a newspaper, now will probably be seen online, and has this little short lifespan very often. I think it's much interesting to put your work into something and have it a long-lasting effect, and build a portfolio of imagery that is helping you to propel good things forward. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Lars, thank you very much for your thoughts on the state of journalism and giving some thoughts, some outlook, and not just a bleak outlook into the future. So there's hope for good journalism, and there's always going to be space for good journalism. And it's also in part of the consumer. We have to learn how to consume news, how to extract the good news and ignore the fake news and everything that's around. It's not getting any easier. There's so many outlets, so many platforms, and so sorting through the different news sometimes can be quite complicated. But I think that's something we have to learn, and then look out for the ones who do a good job and will still get back fascinating stories that help us understand our world a little bit better.
Yeah, I think as a final, I talk a lot about it in keynotes that I do, and it always makes people laugh, whether it's amateurs or professionals. I always say everybody is a photographer, but nobody is really good at it. And as long as this is the case, we all have to keep going forward. And actually, that's a good thing. You know, when is a photographer satisfied? Even if it's a professional, they're always like, maybe I have to go back one more time. So keep that in mind. Everybody is trying its best, and success is certainly there. But as long as we all have to work on it, we're in this together.
And that's a good note to end on. Thank you very much, Lars. All the best for your new job, the European Journalism Center. And thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Ja, das war das Gespräch mit Lars Boering über den Wert von Pressefreiheit und die Kraft von Bildern. Wenn dich das Thema interessiert, dann empfehle ich dir die weiteren Interviews anzuhören, die ich mit den Teilnehmern am Global Peace Photo Award geführt habe. Die Links findest du in den Shownotes zu dieser Episode, und wenn du selbst zum Geschichtenerzähler werden möchtest, dann schau doch mal bei abenteuer-reportagefotografie.de vorbei. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und bis zum nächsten Mal. Dein Kai.